Seek above all for a game worth playing. Oh baby, it's witchcraft contagious. I felt it for ages. We're out of these cages in this house of mages. It's witchcraft, it's dangerous. Beware of these pages. There's spells of all flavors in this house of mages. In this house of mages. In this house of mages.
Hello and welcome. My name's Daniel Cuming. For the past year, I've been laying the foundations for a school of yoga and magic. Some might say that it's a bit of a weird combination. I would say that after 10 years of really delving deeply into both of these paths, I see more similarities than differences, and in fact the synastry between the two works so well that although they're very similar in their practices, techniques, and even goals, they're also different enough to each offer us something unique that can help us expand our experience of ourselves and the cosmos. The ancient yogis and tantrikas spoke openly of their intentions to develop supernatural abilities and powers through these yogic practices, and Aleister Crowley, probably the most famous practitioner of magic that we know of today, wrote extensively about the importance of yoga in the path of magic. It's my goal to reforge the links between yoga and magic and open up the conversation about these beautiful, transformative practices. So without further ado, welcome to the official podcast of the House of Mages. Make yoga magic again. This podcast will be a really good way that I can delve deeper into concepts, ideas, explain things in a lot more detail, and actually give a really good backstory. And especially that's what this first podcast will be, because if you follow me on my socials, you will have seen over the last year or two, I've been just touching base here and there on little parts of my story of how I got into magic and how I got into yoga, and it's especially relevant now because I'm building this, and I feel like I really need to explain why it's such an important project, because even though I've only really been building it the last year or so, the foundations of it really started probably about 10 years ago when I started properly practicing magic and getting into it. And really for the last 4 or 5 years, I've wanted to create this, but didn't think that I had the means to. But some synchronicities have happened over the last year or two, and really pushed me into creating it. And yes, I was right. It has been such a big project and way bigger than I could have ever imagined, but also just very doable. And it's been really exciting, and I've learned so much about myself. So I guess I want to start here with how I got into magic and kind of how I was led into creating this. So I guess as a child, I was always interested in wonder and just figuring out what the world is. I used to like taking things apart and rebuilding them and just unraveling what something is, what the essence of something is. But the thing is, I was never really around magic. I guess I was kind of raised as like the usual Christian-ish way, though I never really went to church. I was raised by my mum, and she was kind of semi-religious, but no actual practice of any of the religions. And as time went on, I started to look at things, and it just didn't add up for me. And I remember one distinct conversation I had with my main high school girlfriend when I was about 16 or 17. And I remember saying to her, we got into a little argument about it, and it was quite like a split moment. It was just such a conscious moment for me when I was talking to her, and I said, don't you ever think about it? Don't you want to know what the world is, or what the universe is, or the cosmos is, and try to figure it all out, and what happens when you die, and don't you ever think about that? Because I think about it a lot. And I remember her saying, you're never going to find out, so why would you bother thinking about it? Why would you bother wasting your time on it? Because you're never going to find out. And she's just, with so much conviction, she just had no interest in discussing it or even contemplating it. And I remember just like feeling so alone and so weird at the time. And yeah, I was still with her for a couple of years after that. And so I kind of like, pushed it down because at the time, my friendship circle, none of the people I was hanging around with really contemplated that sort of stuff. It just wasn't in my circle. And so I kind of looked into it in ways in my own way. There's a lot of long nights just trying to find information on the internet, kind of reading like the Old Testament, New Testament, even delving into the Quran, Scientology, a lot of the mainstream, like mainly Abrahamic religions, I guess, because I just didn't know where to look. And I think that's the issue as well. When people they want something more, they want something, a connection with the divine or connection with the unseen or the unknown. And we only really can look at or find information in what we know about. So, the internet can be good for linking things, but at the time I didn't really know where to start looking. So I was just looking in the mainstream religions and nothing really resonated with me. And I kind of stopped looking for a while until I ended up, I think I was about 21, and I ended up going home with a girl that I met at a nightclub. And the next day, she was explaining to me, I don't even know how we got onto the subject. Oh, because she had these drawings all over her walls. And then I asked her about them because they're amazing, like some of them really dark and all really fantasy-like. And she explained that she can draw her dreams, and that we started talking about dreams, and then she started talking to me about these dreams where, sometimes you get strangled by like the spirits and things, and we started talking about spirits. And so she grew up in Cambodia, the girl that I was with that time, and she explained that spirits were just a part of her everyday existence growing up, and living in Australia now, she still kind of has those beliefs, but everything felt so real for her, and the way she could explain it was even that there's spirits there at the time, and her connection with that, it was just so not in my paradigm, not in my belief system, but I wanted it to be. I wanted so bad for something outside my, I guess, atheistic point of view to exist. And so she felt so grounded. I know it sounds superficial, but she was, like a well-grounded, like successful, very attractive woman, who I was very attracted to, and who seemed so grounded in every other aspect of her life, but yet she was speaking with such conviction about these spirits. So she only came into my life very fleetingly, it was just a short little fling, a very casual type of thing, and she sparked something in me that led me on, I guess, this ghost hunting expedition for the next year, where I was trying to find all the information that I could about how to get in touch with spirits. And I did everything from, knocking in the corners of my bedroom at certain times of the night to, going out to like a graveyard in the middle of Brisbane at 3:33 in the morning on a foggy evening, and then laying down, face down on the ground to breathe in a certain amount of times. And then apparently when you stand up after breathing in the fog, you can see the spirits. None of it worked. At least not in an obvious way. I, never saw anything. I did have one instance of a dream that was really freaky. I remember waking up with sleep paralysis. It was the first time I ever had anything like that. And I remember waking up and the room being completely different. The room hadn't been lived in a long time. And this thing was just moving towards me. And I remember trying to yell and nothing coming out, and kind of being awake, but then also asleep. It was really, really weird and super freaky. But yet I was, I was just dedicated to finding something, but also a lot of the time I didn't believe in any of this sort of stuff. Like I, was very into psychology and very into delving into the human psyche, and kind of just categorized everything that was happening as aspects of my own psyche, because I wanted something real and tangible, I guess. And I guess the word real was, all about objectivity. So I can touch it, I can see it, smell it, all these sort of things. And so, nothing just fulfilled that. Nothing satisfied my curiosity enough for me to believe in any of that sort of stuff. And that, kind of faded off after a while. And I kind of gave up. I guess I just was agnostic / atheist. I didn't really believe in anything outside of the five senses, but I wanted to. And I was, always hoping that something would change my mind on that. So fast forward to I was about 23, 24-ish years old. I was producing music, so I had a kind of like part-time sales job, and I was producing my own music, mainly hip-hop, and producing for local artists. And I'd made like a little CD up, little album, like showcasing some of the artists that I produced for. And I used to go around shopping centers and I was selling them. And I met this man who bought a CD, and he after he bought a CD, he said, "Oh, I'm really interested in getting involved in hip hop, and I've always wanted to like learn how to do it myself. Can we catch up and chat?" And I said, of course. We caught up and chat. I remember him pulling up. He had a Skyline and some Skyline, and just kind of dressed well. Obviously had money. I met some of his friends who all seemed like quite normal, and and again, this is like my old self. So you have to understand that, even though I call this normal, it's just what my normal was. And I guess I was so skeptical about things, and just wasn't exposed to this sort of stuff. And I guess when I say, normal, it's we believe in things from people that we give authority to. And I guess at my level, when I was like deep in doing a lot of sales work, people that were, I gave authority to were people who was like financially successful, right? Who, who had money, who spoke well, who were charismatic, who, had like, friends and, who like, especially in men who like hang out with attractive women, again, super superficial, but that was just where I was at the time in my life. And so he had all these kind of things. And one day, out of nowhere, he started talking about magic. And I didn't know what he meant. And so like he ended up telling me about these books. And he meant, so not magic as in card tricks and all that sort of stuff, even though I have a great respect for those arts and dabble with them myself. And I think there is a link there a little bit. But when I mean magic, I mean like spells and what people would call witchcraft, and dabbling with the unseen and spirits and all this sort of stuff. A lot of things that people would say to stay away from. But so this guy started talking to me about all these practices that he'd done. He'd summoned spirits. He dabbled with all these different magical system. He had dabbled with runes. And so he obviously asked if I was interested in learning, and I was just so excited. Like there was a big part of me that lit up and this flame that ignited, and I just thought, wow, this stuff be real? But there was also a huge part of me that was just like this niggling voice at the back of my mind saying, this guy is just nuts. There's no reality in this. But I wanted to try. So, I asked for a book, and I said, what book should I get? And I just said, I'm really skeptical, something you could give me that would, help with that. And he gave me a book, which I actually have right here, called Hermetic Magic by Stephen Edred Flowers, PhD. So the PhD was a really good thing for me at the time because I was so skeptical. So, I saw the PhD and saw it was kind of like a scholarly-ish work, and I was like, okay, well, at least then I'll get some grounded information on it. And the book started by giving a history and really started to elaborate on where these ideas came from, especially Hermeticism, Hermetic magic. And it was cool because they spoke about Egyptian and Greek history and the ancient papyri. And yeah, it like appeals. I was always interested in ancient history and ancient cultures. So it appealed to me, and I said, at least I'm going to be learning something from it. And so I read through the book, and I was excited. It like opened up new avenues for me. But I was still so skeptical. And so like they had some of the transcribed magical papyri in the back. And I just thought, well, I got nothing to lose. If this really is real, then show me something. And I think I was at that point in my life where I felt like this was like my last call out to the universe before I kind of gave up the search. I guess I probably would have never given up, but that's what I felt like. I was like, look, universe, I've been like searching for so long. If there is anything out there that, is listening, that is more than, just the five senses, like, answer me now. And I remember just doing this basic little invocation. It was like the most simple spell I could do, where I just sat on my bed. I think I like maybe lit a candle or something like that, and just focused all my willpower and all my emotion, just called out to the universe. And then I went to sleep. And I had a dream that night that I was in this dark room, no features of the room I could notice, but there was a man and a woman. I'm pretty sure the woman was kind of in front of me to my left a little bit, and the man was off to the right a little bit. So the man had like a wide brimmed hat, and he kind of had his face down. I couldn't really see. Like, I don't know if he had a beard or not a beard. I can't really remember. Every time I think of it, it kind of looks different. The woman had a box. It was this wooden box that kind of looked like a little cigar box. And she put 2 snakes into this box. And I remember her saying that these were the 2 most venomous snakes in existence. So she closed the box. And then when she reopened it, this smaller snake came out. And I remember saying, oh, like there's only 1 snake now and it's smaller. Like, why did that happen? And she said that even though that's the case, this one is just so much more potent now. So it's even more potent than both of them combined. And now this is the most venomous snake in existence. And right at that moment, it bit me on my left wrist. And I remember the pain. I remember the feeling of its teeth sinking into my wrist. And I remember like the shooting terror that flooded my body, and just the feeling that I was going to die, that like that was absolutely it. And I remember like moments passing that seemed like forever, and then just saying, oh, I didn't die. I didn't die. And then like the lady looked at me like surprised, like, wow, you didn't die. And then I think it was the first time in that whole dream that the man kind of glanced at me. He didn't show much emotion, but he kind of glanced at me. And then I woke up, and my wrist was red and throbbing. And I freaked out, of course, and went to the bathroom, washed my face, washed my hands and wrists, and yeah, kind of just settled a little bit and went back to sleep. And anyway, I was catching the train into the city in Brisbane on the way to work, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, it could have been a spider or something that bit me in the middle of the night, and just trying to make sense of it. It could have just affected my dream, and that would have explained the redness, the pain. Anyway, there was these 3 kind of older ladies, looked like they were kind of like dressed up to go for a brunch or something like that, sitting on the train, because there's these seats on trains, right, that have 4 seats facing each other. There was 3 ladies next to me, and they got up and left at a stop, and I glanced over to my left where they were sitting, and I noticed that, and I swear it was where one of these ladies was sitting, there was a perfect big S shape made out of instant noodle flavoring, which was so strange. But I swear the lady was sitting on one of them. Anyway, so I got up and moved over to the seats and just stared at it. I took a picture of it. I still got it somewhere. And is this perfect S made out of, like instant noodle flavoring. Strangest thing. And so I was like, okay, this is strange. So then I think like a day or two later, so I think at the time I just moved out of a place I was living at, and I was staying with my mum for a little while. I think I was staying with her for a few weeks until I found a new place. And she just said, yeah, of course you can stay, just, help clean up some stuff. And there's this tiny little shed out the back of the house. And she asked me to clean it out a little bit. And I had a friend with me who was helping me clean. And I remember just being there and he just going, bro, just stop. Don't move. And he's like, back up and look up. And I looked above me, and just hanging from this low-hanging beam was this python. It must have been like 6-7 foot, just staring at me. I mean, it was like at least like half a meter away, like a few feet away, maybe closer, just staring me dead in the eyes. And so that's the house I grew up in, my mum's house. And I don't think there was ever a snake there. I asked my mum if there's ever been a snake there. She said there was like one little snake when I was a little kid, that showed up when I was like only a few years old or something. So it wasn't an unusual occurrence to have snakes there. So yeah, just all those things, it was enough to shake my reality enough to chip away at my wall of skepticism that I'd put up. And I think that's what happens with magic, synchronicity. A lot of these things from the outside, like they might not mean much to anybody, but to me, it was exactly what I needed to experience in order to warrant delving into this more. And so after that, I was like, okay, universe, I'm open. What else have you got for me? And I've had like weird synchronicities, like pretty epic ones since, but they're very rare. And I think once you start to delve into it, you need those things less and less. And it's only at certain times in my life which I've needed like the big reminder, because it's shattered my reality. But a lot of these things are quite subjective. And so sometimes we need reminders that this stuff is real. So after the snake dream and all these weird coincidences, I was ready to give this magic thing a little bit more validity and look into it more. So I went back to the guy who gave me the book and basically said, where do I go from here? What more can I read? What more books can you give me? Because, as much as Hermetic Magic was such an amazing book, and it is a bit of a scholarly work and underpins like a whole system, but the actual practical spells in it are quite complicated and difficult. And I just needed something to, a little bit different. And I'm glad I asked, because he gave me 2 books. And one of them was a book called The 9 Doors of Midgard, which is a whole book on runes and essentially a whole school and a whole system and curriculum on rune magic. And it was written by Edred Thorson, which coincidentally was a different pen name of the same author who wrote the first book I read. And the Rune Guild, which is the main school that I study under these days, is actually an amazing esoteric school, and magic school and school of runes. So I will do another podcast on that later. You'll hear lots more about that. But the other book was a book on ceremonial magic by Joseph Lazowski. And it, again, was a very scholarly book. And it gave the history of the process of ceremonial magic and spiritual evocation. Now, for those who don't know what that is, it's essentially old school, kind of Hermetic, I guess, but I think of it like old school medieval grimoire magic. So when you think of, someone sitting in a circle with all these signs and letters and names and like this magical circle and a triangle and, conjuring up a spirit, like that is ceremonial magic or evocation in particular. So I will come back to my experience in those practices with all that kind of stuff soon. But I want to try to keep on track with what was happening around the same time, kind of in chronological order, because a lot was happening at once. So as all this was happening. I was being introduced to this concept of magic. I had the snake dream. Right at the same time, I had started dabbling in martial arts, and I kind of had tried a few different martial arts before when I was younger, but never really stuck with anything. And I went to a few classes of Tai Chi and Kung Fu with a friend of mine who was training with this teacher. And I met the teacher, and he said, if you're interested in being serious and dedicating some time, like, some serious time to learning Kung Fu, to come down and do like a trial session with him on the beach. So he had a private group. There was probably only about 6 or 7 people in that group, which he trained on the beach down the Gold Coast, which was about an hour and a half drive from where I was living in Brisbane at the time. And so I made my way down there one Friday night and expected like a really cool, martial arts class. And they were training on the beach. It was like beautiful. There was like nearly a full moon. And he just said, so you're serious? So you obviously come down here. Are you serious about learning Kung Fu? And I said, yeah, I'm serious. He's like, great. He's like, stand like this, set me up in a horse stance. So a horse stance is kind of like a little mini squat position with your arms out. He set me up and he said, cool, that looks good. Don't move for the next 2 hours. If you move, you can go home. He said, if you stay the 2 hours, I'll train you. And I kind of laughed and stuff like that. I thought he was just like messing with me, but he was dead serious. And it kind of like kicked in that this guy is serious. And I was like, how am I going to stay like this for 2 hours? Like, I've been in this position for like a minute and my legs are already starting to get a little bit wobbly. So I did it. It was like this experience that showed me the power of the human will, or my will, when I really wanted to do something, over the human body. And that's what it was really about. Like, one, earning the right to train, but also just showing you, because he was very much into, I guess, he didn't really use the term magic. He did a couple of times, but really the power of, the conscious will over the body. So it was interesting that at the time where I was being introduced to magic and all these concepts, that I was really starting to learn these, embodiment techniques. And so he became a really good mentor for me, obviously, like learning Kung Fu and all that sort of stuff. But I was introduced to breathwork. I was introduced to meditation. He got me to quit smoking cigarettes. At the time, I was drinking a lot, partying a lot, smoking cigarettes a lot. And he basically, got me to quit cigarettes, quit going and partying all the time. I still obviously went out and had fun, but I had another goal. And that was, I guess, to impress him and to really get my health and body on track, which up until that point I'd really neglected. This was, when I was about 23 years old that I started doing that. And so not only was the martial arts aspect of it and the discipline of it, but it was the meditation, because every day I would do probably about 20 to 30 minutes of horse stance. And so while I was doing that, I was doing this breath pattern that he taught me, which was the 3-3-6-3. So it was breathe in for 3, hold for 3, out for 6, hold for 3. Breathe in for 3, hold for 3, out for 6, hold for 3. And so I was doing that pretty much every day, consistently, and without knowing it, being introduced to meditation. So that became like the starting point, because I remember him saying to me something along the lines of, the martial arts will make you a good fighter, but the horse stance, and what he meant by that, like the meditation and the breath work, he's like, that stuff will make you a Jedi. Like, that stuff will make you a wizard, because he kind of knew what I was into. And that really struck a chord with me. And I started practicing that nearly every day. So while all this was happening, so I was, starting to delve into martial arts and meditation. I was, devouring books on magic. The third part of this, because everything works in threes, right? was that I'd met a girl. So I was out at a nightclub one evening, and I was with, this guy who had been giving me books, although I didn't really tell my other friends about it. It was kind of like this little secret between us, because I just didn't think they'd understand. But it was another one of my friend's birthday. So we went out for his birthday, and there was a group of us. And I noticed this girl, on the dance floor in this nightclub that I was at in Brisbane, and she just gave me this look. So when I'd first met the girl who spoke to ghosts and kind of got me inspired and all that sort of stuff, I remember seeing her in a similar way. I was at a nightclub, and it was just that kind of like mischievous, cheeky look, and like it was just like she was saying, "Come and play," but it was like something out of this world as well. I don't know if anyone's experienced like the eyes, you know, there's a reason why they call them doors of the soul, because like they really can, anyone who's done eye gazing, it's a very, out of body experience, but also very in body experience at the same time. I don't know if this is making sense. But anyway, so it was that same look that I had from that other girl, of the eyes, you know, very different looking girl, but those same kind of look in the eyes. And I remember thinking, no, I'm not here to meet a girl. I'm here to spend time with my friend for his birthday. And so I was like, bro, I'm going to go get, you know, another couple of drinks for us. So I started heading to the bar, and it was a big club. And so where the bar was pretty much the other end of the club to where she was on the dance floor. I don't know what happened. Like, I hadn't drank that much, honestly. Like, I'd only had like 1 or 2 drinks by that stage. And I just remember heading for the bar, getting kind of like lost in the crowd because it was so busy. And then suddenly I was dancing with her and her 2 friends, and we just clicked. Like, I really liked hip hop and dancing, and so did she, and like we were just dancing really well. But then pretty soon into the dance, she like kind of like grabbed me, and she's like, "Hey, do you want to go somewhere and chat?" And so we went to this little nook of the club, and she just grabbed my arm, and she's like, what's this tattoo? And so I've obviously missed that part of the story. So I actually ended up getting a tattoo of the snake that happened in my dream on the arm, and it's actually biting my wrist. So if you're watching the video here, so I'm recording the video at the same time I'm doing this podcast. So if you want to see the video I'm showing, so I got that tattoo because the guy who gave me the book actually got a big bonus at his job, which I ended up working at later, which I'll get to soon. So many pieces of this puzzle all at once happening. And that's what the interesting thing, it all happened at once. So the guy got a bonus from his job and said he was going to go get a tattoo. And I'd already had a couple of tattoos by then, and asked if I wanted one. And instantly, like, my whole body just said, yes, I want the snake. I need a reminder that this stuff is real, because I'm going to forget about it and I'm going to go back to my skepticism. I believe in this so strongly that this is important that I'm going to get it tattooed on my arm. So that was how dedicated I was to like pursuing this world of like this path of magic, and like really reminding myself that there was something in this that that was important. I had the recent tattoo done on my left arm, and she grabbed my arm and like kind of like, what's this? Well, why do you have this tattoo? And at the time I was quitting smoking because I was doing the Kung Fu, and all my friends that I used to hang out with used to drink a lot and smoke cigarettes a lot. So whenever I go out with them, they'd all smoke, and they'd kind of try to encourage me to smoke again, as good friends do, who don't want to give up their smoking, and it probably is like, triggering for them to see me giving up. Anyway, I had these lollipops. They're called Chupa Chups, and they're just these like candy lollipops. And so I had a pocket of them, because every time that my friends would have a cigarette, or if I craved one, I would just have one of these lollipops. And so they all kind of fell to the ground. And she kind of like, she's like, what are these? And picked one up. And as she bent over, on the kind of like side of her hip was this tattoo. And it was a tattoo of a pentagram, and it had all these little little additions to it. Like, so there's like this little broomstick and a cat, a little black cat next to the broomstick, and a mushroom, and all these little things, and like this Virgo sign. If you follow me on my socials, it'll all be in writing and more in depth there. But I'll just touch on it here. But anyway, it was just such a coincidence, because obviously like that was linked to magic for me, the pentagram, such like the cliched obvious thing of magic. But I know there's the idea that we tend to notice things that we're looking for, right? So, you buy a red car, you'll see red cars everywhere. But I swear I've never really noticed people with pentagrams, or it didn't show up much. And right at that time, that girl with a pentagram. And so I said to her, I was just like, do you practice magic? And she just looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She's like, of course. Don't you? And I don't know, it just rocked me. And because I like, just to this moment, I was just dumbfounded that she was speaking of this like it was such a normal thing. And obviously we hit it off, ended up moving in with her, like all these synchronicities. I was with her for like 6 months before I moved in with her, because she was living with her parents at this apartment in Brisbane. They were moving away, and like they didn't know what to do with the place. So I ended up renting it from them, because they were just renting it and they wanted to pass on the lease. It was perfect. The place was like in the middle of the city, up on this hill with this epic balcony facing north with this huge, amazing mango tree. It was beautiful right next to it. And like some of the practices that I started doing, you had to face north and you do these full moon things, which I'll explain another time, but it was just perfect. And right at that time as well, the guy who I'd met, who was quite successful and, introduced me to magic, I ended up having an opening at this sales company that he was working with. And so I started working there. And so I just started making insane amounts of money at this job, where I got to chat to this guy about magic all the time in the breaks, where I was like starting really like delving into all this sort of stuff. I could like look up books online and buy them. I had a girlfriend who was like, would give me this like intuitive, insane advice. Like, she was quiet most of the time about certain things, but if I'd touched on something, she would elaborate on it. So I might be like, oh, I just realized this, or this is like a cool concept. And then she'd be like, oh, that's really good that you figured that out. And did you think of it this way? And she'd just give me more. Like, there's this saying, like a word leads to another word. And I would figure something out about the cosmos or myself, and she would just kind of elaborate on it. She was just strange, like gorgeous girl that was like just really quirky, and would say this thing that like she would say that this is her last incarnation on Earth. And it was just strange to me. She's like, yeah, I've just been here enough times. I've just got, stuff to do here this last time that's important, but then I'm done. And it was just the weirdest thing that I'd heard someone say. Anyway, I'm rambling now, but I think there's this importance, because if you follow me on my socials, like, and you're following my story, depending on how far I've got with it at this point, you probably see a theme that, and I've talked about the idea of the Scarlett Lover. And I've learned a lot about my romantic relationships. And anyone who's been in a romantic relationship, especially like one that like really potent and magical, you learn so much through it. And that has been a big theme for me, that my lovers have taught me so much about myself and about through my magical path. And yeah, different people have like different pillars of where they learn from, and that they've got their most growth from. And yeah, I've like had resistance to talking about it, especially in written, because it just seems like I'm just talking about, these women or these lovers that I've had just for the sake of it. But they've been so important to my growth. And some of them I'm still like in amazing touch with. And so I'll delve into that again another point. I talked more about the Scarlett Lover concept in another talk that I gave, which I'll end up linking in this podcast as well later. So throughout all this that was happening at once, the main thing that was missing, or that I wanted so badly, was a group to, I guess, practice this with. So yes, even though I did have this guy to talk to about it, he said he didn't practice magic anymore. Even though he was really interested in it, it was more like an intellectual thing for him, because from what I'd said, like about his practices, he just didn't want to dabble in it anymore. Partly because I think some of it he thought was bad, but also he claimed he'd gotten to a point where he didn't need to practice anymore. And, at the time I thought he was right. But as time went on, I realized like how he'd kind of, I guess, deluded himself a little bit in how powerful he was, because he did have a lot of like things successfully, but he was quite negative. And yeah, a lot of what he kind of said didn't add up towards the end. And I'm not in touch with him anymore. I think he's actually gone a little bit off the rails in a lot of different areas. But it does show, like, I guess, the dangers of magic, which I do want to touch on early. And that can be, you know, some people say that, like, it's actually the magic itself, but it's really not learning about yourself enough, because it can really imbalance your psyche, because you're essentially changing your whole view of the world. And you can get, you know, drunk on power, thinking you're like a god, or, you know, invincible, and that you have all this power and you can do anything you want, and there's no, you know, no one that can stop you doing that. And that can be, I guess, a real thing, that you can get a lot of power. Some people think they have a lot more power than they do, and delude themselves. Some people just get really unbalanced, because, and I think that's why it's important now that I'm building this House of Mages and this school, that people can bounce ideas and get feedback, and also have people checking in on them, right? Keeping them accountable. And I think accountability is a really important part, because you can get so in your head and so in, like, la la land with magical practices, that if you don't have someone checking in on you, calling you on your stuff, and making sure that you are still grounded in reality and what that even means, then you can really go into your own fantasy world and lose touch with reality. And that can be a very real danger with any spiritual practices. If you go too inward, then you can lose the grip on reality and with society in general. And sometimes that's an important part, to withdraw, to, like, you know, take away other people's perspectives and whatever other people have said the world is, so you can make up your own mind about what the world is. But also, I think it's important to have, like, you know, be in contact with other travelers on a similar path, so they can be like, hey man, like, you've, you know, a bit funny around this area, and this doesn't really make a lot of sense, and you're saying that you're doing this, but yet this is happening, and it doesn't add up, and all these kind of things. So yeah, two things here. Like, there wasn't anyone that I could bounce ideas off that was on, I guess, a similar path to me. But also, even though I did have, like, books that gave a curriculum, I really, like, preferred to learn person to person, like orally, like oral traditions, like passing on via the word and spoken word. And I was really missing that. And I wished that there was, like, a school that I could hang out with, or even online that, I guess, had videos, because I learned so much better through, like, demonstrations. And so a lot of these rituals I was reading about, and I was like, wow, these are really elaborate rituals, and I don't know if I'm, like, saying this right or doing the right thing, pronouncing it right. And I just didn't have anyone to talk to about these sort of things. And, you know, I guess that had its positives, because I really had to, like, learn by myself and, like, really delve into a lot of these things and try a lot of these different techniques. But yeah, I think that's what was really missing. And now building this magic school, I can have that now, for, I guess, for myself, but also for other people who are going through a similar path. And yeah, this can be available, and a community around that as well. So on the other side of that, at the time, because I didn't really have anyone, I was like, okay, I'm going to find people around me. Like, there'll be people here in the city that, like, you know, practice, like, secret mages, and you know, they're out there. I've just got to find them. And so I started looking. Like, I looked up on like just local internet sites and stuff, if people were advertising, like, pagan get-togethers, or, you know, like, witch groups, or anyone really. I ended up finding. So one of them, I found this, like, pagan get-together, which was for, like, a midsummer thing. And yeah, it was just this group of people who were kind of, like, dressed kind of medievally, and basically they just set up a pole and danced around it. And it was fun and nice people, but, like, I was like, oh, who's your leader? Like, who's your organizer? Because I was like, does anyone practice runes? Does anyone, like, practice magic and all this sort of stuff? And they're like, most of them are like, oh, not really. We just kind of, like, we have, like, crystals and we do these things, but, like, none of us really, like, practice, like, dedicated. And then I was like, I'm really into runes. Does anyone knows about runes? And, like, oh, the guy that organized this knows runes really well. And so I ended up chatting with him, and he had a thing of crystal runes, but he only used them, like, very rarely. And yeah, I guess because I'd, like, devoured a lot of information from the books, and I knew the history of where all these things came from, and understood, like, the concept of practices, and yeah, and a lot of these practices in these books very systematic. So like first you kind of like train your physical body, and then you get like train your mental, and then intuitive, and then you like start to work magic. And I guess I saw it as like a systematic approach to mastery. And yet a lot of these people just saw it as like dressing up and dancing around a pole and saying they're a pagan. And I don't know, I guess I started to realize that there was, people that were into paganism weren't necessarily magicians. And when I say magicians, people that actively practice magic. So I believe that you can practice magic and really not have any beliefs outside of your own personal existence. And you don't have to subscribe to any like paradigm or pantheon or religion, because you're just testing out ideas and seeing what works. And that's why with the House of Mages, and especially ritual embodiment, which is the yoga school side of it, is trying to keep it as simple and practical and what paradigm neutral as possible. So paradigm neutral is this idea that so Christianity would be a paradigm, right? It's a belief system. You have deities, you have a belief in the cosmos. Even Hinduism would be a paradigm. Like Norse mythology would be a paradigm. And so everyone's got different views on what this means and what mythic thinking is. But what are the essential practices that you can do that you can apply to almost any belief system and get results and still grow as a human and grow your consciousness? And that's what I'm really interested in bringing through this school, is giving you a template to learn how to do these practices, but then it can also apply to any magical system or any belief system that you embark upon and that you choose to go down. I don't want these podcasts to be too long each, so I think I'll have to continue this story in a part 2 of this podcast. I thought that might happen because I think that's the beauty of these podcasts, is you can go on tangents. And, I'll admit I didn't really even know where to start in telling the story, because there's all these different parts that connect, and I wanted to bring it through in like a concise way. But as I speak, I think there's lots of little parts that are really essential and really important to each part of the story. So there will be at least a part 2 to this. So I will release that very soon. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, which was the first House of Mages podcast. It has been such a journey, and I'm looking forward to sharing so much with you. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions because I've really just touched on a few topics and haven't really expanded upon them. I would love to hear from you and hear any questions, because as time goes on, I would really love to hear how this is landing for you, and expand upon that. And obviously we will get to the practical application of what the House of Mages is doing, and how you can get involved. But for now, I will leave you with that for part 1 of my story. Thank you for listening, and make yoga magic again.